Today Live. I'm Singyi, your host for today. Thank you for joining us live today, and it is good to see you all once again. Nowadays, we can't live without technology. It has been part of our daily life. But technology sectors have hit hard in the US and on global scale. Why? So make sure you stay tuned throughout our whole live session and enjoy listening to the topic of technology and you. Technology is so advanced nowadays, Teng Boo, like that enable us to connect and communicate easily with our loved ones, and everyone just a quick through social media. Before going straight to the topic, do follow us Capital Dynamics on our social medias as well: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and click the subscribe button in our YouTube channel for our latest updates. Stay tuned and feel free to comment or raise any questions as usual in our Facebook Live. So we'll be answering them throughout the live session. Make sure you stay tuned with us until the end of the session. Like, comment, and share this live on your Facebook feed as well. And once again, welcome our speaker Teng Boo to our live. Hi Teng Boo.
Good morning, everyone. Uh, I don't know whether you can hear the sound
Land
of
dance.
the drums in the background because our office, where we are now, we are in KL, Chinatown, near Petaling Street. And the last few days, we have been having live performances of line dance. We are about 16th floor above the street level, and you can hear the drums quite clearly. I'm not sure whether you can hear them. If you can hear them, it's just to remind you that we are still in the middle of the Chinese New Year period. Although we're wearing red, we're always wearing red. It's not
Yes.
because of Chinese New Year, it's our corporate color.
Mm.
And I hope the drums do not affect what you can hear from us. If it is affecting you, if it's affecting our voice, please comment. Please let us
Let us
know.
know.
Please let us know so that we can do something about it in future. All right. So we are back to our regular Saturday uh, 11 o'clock live session. Going forward, you'll be live again on Saturday at 11 o'clock. And also, please let us know whether you find 11 o'clock Saturday to be more convenient, more suitable, or whether you prefer 5:30 Friday. Right? Let us know so that we can have the session at the time that is most convenient for you all. All
Yes.
right, that feedback is extremely useful. So the clarification first, there's no such thing as advanced technology because if you look at technology now, it is backward compared with technology from the next 50, 100 years. It is advanced only if you compare with the last 50, 100 years or the last few centuries. So advanced technology is always advancing, and 50 years from now, 20 years from now, you'll be saying that, oh, wow, social media and all is so backward, is so lousy. And because technology is always changing, so the impact on societies, on economies, on our way of life, on the way we live, on the way we communicate will constantly change. Uh, is that good? Is that bad? I think that is a more of a value judgment, right? It depends really on each person's circumstances. For some people, change in technology is a positive. For some people, change in technology is neutral. And for many, change in technology is basically negative, right? So if you look at it from a larger perspective, change in technology to a large extent has contributed to climate change. We generally think of changes in technology, advancing technology in a positive way. But if you sit down quietly and think about it deeply, why do we have climate change problem only in the last 150 years. Why is it that human civilization did not really have to deal with climate change problem in the course of thousands of years of human civilization? You know, so advance in technology is something, it's not neutral. There's a lot of value judgment to it, and the important issue is it good for society? Is it good for all of us? Now that is the larger the larger context. But for today's live session, I think we're more concerned with. I think if I read your minds correctly, I think we're more concerned with what is happening to the technology sector, whether it's US or elsewhere.
Global.
What is the impact in terms of economy, in terms of financial markets, in terms of your investment? I think that's a much narrower focus. So the if you take the Nasdaq Composite as the bellwether indicator, right, for the global technology, then you find that the Nasdaq Composite peak towards the end of 2021, and in 2022, the Nasdaq Composite Index, together with the semiconductor index, plunge, right? They plunge like something like 30, 35, 40%. And at the beginning of 2022, you don't really hear of layoffs, retrenchments. You hardly hear companies announcing retrenchments or having earnings or revenue that are lower than what is expected. But as 2022 unfolded, right, the situation has worsened. So if you, I'm not able to show you. I have the graph here, but it's in black and white, and you probably won't be able to see it. But never mind, let me give it a shot and see. I don't know whether you all can see this chart here, right? This is here. This is 2020. This is when the pandemic broke out, and this is where we are now, right? This chart shows you retrenchments in the technology sector in US, right? So you can see on your right hand side, the retrenchment has surpassed the level that was reached in 2020 during the worst period of the pandemic. So what is happening? Why is the retrenchment only happening now? So usually the stock market index is a leading indicator. It's looking forward. In this case, the Nasdaq Composite Index was looking forward maybe 12 months, 12 to 15 months ahead. And when the stock prices of AMD, Nvidia, TSMC, Applied Materials, Amazon.com, when all these stock prices all started plunging, it's a leading indicator that look, the problems of the technology sector is going to worsen and go down to the level of revenue of employment. So what you're saying now, since third, fourth quarter of 2022 and continuing in January 2023 is a lot of announcements of retrenchments. You're not talking about just startups, you're not just talking about companies like DocuSign or Zoom Communication. You're referring to companies like Microsoft, Amazon.com,
Apple?
Tesla, Twitter, Alphabet, Salesforce, IBM. So these are companies that are solid. These are your big techs, the mega techs that have announced huge layoffs. Right? The only huge mega tech stock that has not announced layoff is Apple so far. But we'll see whether Apple will be able to withstand the very strong recessionary pressures that the technology is facing, the technology sector is facing, and the larger US economy is facing. So if you look at the economic indicators, particularly for US, for most of the year it was holding up quite well. And towards the end of the year, towards the end of 2022, by November, December, things started to contract. Consumer spending, for example, only started declining in November 2022 and it continued in December 2022. Now, December 2022, don't forget, for America, it's a festive season, it's the Christmas period where consumer spending should be increasing, right? But for December 2022, the decline in consumer spending was worse than the decline in November 2022. So what I'm saying is that what the figures are telling us is that the stock market, the technology sector particularly peaked end 2021, continued to plunge in 2022. Then you see towards the end of 2022, the real impact on retrenchment on revenue starting to turn up, and you see U.S. consumer spending turning negative in November, December 2022. Now the question people ask is,
We
does
have a
that mean
question. We have a question from Jackson.
does that mean that the technology sector is the worst is over, right? Because you have companies like even ASML, which is a global monopoly, right? At its worst, the stock price of ASML plunged 65%. Now, that is a huge crash. Of course, recently it's rebounded a lot. Amazon.com plunged 60, 70, 80%, and then slowly beginning to rebound. Tesla used to be 400 over US dollars at the peak, and at the low it plunged to about 100 US dollars. That's a 75% decline, a 75% crash. So that crash has happened, and the many of the stocks seems to have bottomed and slightly trying to have a slight rebound. And then you have this layoff, massive layoff, right? So what are you looking at? What should you look at? The stock market index or the layoff to be able to answer yourself what is going to happen in 2023 and in 2024 with regards to technology. The stock market index is the leading indicator. The layoff is more of a coincident lagging indicator. So, to answer the question whether we have hit bottom for the technology sector, you cannot just look at the index, whether it's Nasdaq Composite or the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index. You cannot look at the layoff, right? The layoff is confirming the crash in the technology stock prices. To be able to answer yourself what's going to happen in the next 12 to 24 months, you have to unfortunately look at things like very ordinary things like US inflation rate, US interest rate. And to be able to answer yourself on US inflation rate, you have to look at a lot of factors, right? In the past, we know that US dollar strengthened and that helped to contain inflation. But US dollar has peaked, US dollar has started to fall. In other words, in 2023, 2024, US imported prices for US is going to climb because of a falling US dollar. That's one, right? That's going to add on to inflationary pressure. Next one is the US labor market is still pretty tight. It's still strong. The labor market indicators are all showing a US job market that is still not suffering overall from massive layoff, right? So the other thing that you have to watch with regards to US inflation is, of course, the global situation. While the US may be slowing down, Europe doesn't seem to be as bad as what people feared 6 to 12 months ago. So what that would mean is that global demand, particularly with China reopening, global demand for commodities, for goods, for energy, most likely will be stronger than what is expected. Now that would mean most likely that crude oil price, energy price will be going up. If that is the case, then it's going to fit into the US uh, cost of living structure, and that would therefore either sustain U.S. inflation rate at a high level, or it might even reverse. It might even start to see an increase in U.S. inflation rate again, because U.S. inflation rate has been dropping in the last 4 to 6 months, and that's partly due to decline in energy price. So that may reverse because Europe economy is not as weak as feared. China is opening up in a massive way, and that is going to lead to higher prices, crude oil, energy prices. Together with a weaker US dollar, that would create additional inflationary pressure for the US economy. And at the same time, the US labor market is still tight. So if you look forward in that way, then 2023 is going to be a very uh, it's a very uncertain period, because the cycle that we're in, we meaning the global economy, is very different from the past economic and business cycles. In the past, you can predict more or less quite clearly what the patterns are going to be. This time around, this time meaning starting from 2020, starting with the pandemic up to now, you have a lot of factors, events that have never happened before, factors and events that are happening at the same time. You have the Ukrainian crisis, which doesn't seem to end anytime soon. It looks like it's going to get worse. You have climate change problem, which most likely will impact on food prices, commodity prices, cost of living, and then of course you have the geopolitical tension between U.S. and China, right? So how would this all these factors impact on U.S. inflation? That is not an easy question to answer. Yeah, it is something that the U.S. and investor would have to monitor on a very regular basis. It's like, I mean, in our case, we look at so many things. Uh, by 1st February, which is just next week, the US FOMC is going to announce their next decision. It looks like interest rate is going to go up again for US. So most people are expecting a 25 basis points increase, right? And after that, followed after the FOMC meeting, you have the US labor market data. So if the Federal Reserve were to hike interest rate by 25 basis points, then it's more or less factored in. But it's not just that, it's also what their comments are. They may say, okay, I'm going to hike 25 basis points, but that kind of caveat, that kind of disclaimer, then the financial markets would pick that up and pay attention to that. Or they increase 25 basis points and the US labor market data points to worsening or labor market that's going to tighten even more. Then the 25 basis point increase in the FOMC meeting would be ignored. So you have a situation where the US Federal Reserve, in a way, is not in full control, because many of the factors are beyond the control of the US Federal Reserve. I'm talking about US interest rates and US inflation, right? And that's what makes 2023 interesting, or fearful, or uncertain, depending on the situation that you're in. Now, that would lead to help you to answer the question whether the stock prices, the stock price of the technology stocks have bottomed out, because tech stocks are extremely sensitive to interest rate for various reasons, right? Now, if it so happens in 2023, the US interest rate climbs further, and stay high, and the US inflation rate doesn't drop or decline at a rate which is very slow, then there's that kind of scenario is going to hit the US tech sector again. So the layoff that you see now most likely would not be the last. And then you might see the Nasdaq Composite or the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index dropping again further. I mean, in terms of earnings for 2023, US corporate earnings, it looks like it's going to be weak because you have sales dropping, consumer spending drops, therefore sales of companies will drop. But your costs are rising. So profit margin of US companies are going to get narrowed. You have falling sales, you got narrowing profit margin, therefore your earnings is going to be a lot lower. If you look at the results, it's not just the tech, it's not just Intel, Texas Instrument, it's also 3M, it's also Dow, it's also the non-tech sector that are facing the same problems. So I think overall, I would say that uh, I wouldn't want to say that the bottom has been reached for the tech sector. I wouldn't say that a new rally has started. I would prefer to play it safe. And then now it's January 2023. I want to see how the global economy unfolds, particularly the reopening of China. Based on preliminary indicators, it shows that the Chinese consumers, I mean, look, they've been locked down for 3 years. There's a lot of pent up demand in China, and I think they're going to come back with a lot of revenge spending. And then I want to see how the US labor market unfolds. So there's still a lot of variables, there are a lot of moving parts that I don't have a firm grip on.
Yes, Teng Boo, we have a question from Gyap Singh. So, Facebook, thank you for a question. Tech sector or semiconductor sector is a cyclical sector. We have dot-com bubble, which burst. We have COVID pandemic cycle, which sent all the tech companies skyrockets. But when the valuation is too high, it drops eventually. So, is that something that Teng Boo you call old fools, new fools, and the regular fools?
Old fools, new fools, regular fools is a phrase that we coined back in 1993 or 1994. And what I observe is that in every stock market cycle, whether it's technology, whether it's rubber glove, whether it is the small cap, whichever type of boom and bust we have, the stock market will always draw in all kinds of people, right? So there's one type where beginners, the newcomers, and they're the new fools because they have not really experienced. Of course, when they invest, they hope to get 50% return in 1 month,
1 month.
and then the reality will sink in. So they'll go through the new full phase first, right? And then hopefully they learn from there and graduate to become an old fool. But a lot of new fools, unfortunately, don't graduate. They become permanent fools, and those are the regular fools, right? So when it comes to the tech sector, yes, uh, the last boom and bust was in 1999, 2000, where MPI went up from 5 ringgit to 55 ringgit in about 15 months. And then from 55 ringgit, it fell back to 5 ringgit again. Same thing for Unisem. Uh, that's sort of cycle. In a way, we're seeing it now. We saw Tesla in 2019, 2020 was about $50 US, went up to 400, and recently it crashed all the way down to below 100.
Yeah.
So the cycles will always repeat, and in every cycle, you will draw in the new fools, and the old fools will probably be a bit more cautious because they've been burned before, and then you wait for a new cycle again, and then you have the new fools again, and the old fools and the regular fools. So
And all the fools.
make sure that you don't become a regular fool.
Yes. And we have question from KB Leong. Thank you for question. How do you see continued layoff affecting biotechnology companies such as Pacific Bioscience in Beijing?
The biotech, those like Invite and Pac Bio that you mentioned, uh, their business planning has been a lot better. Pac Bio has got, even before all this crash happened, they raised $1 billion over US. I mean, they knew what their cash burn rate was like, so they already have in the balance sheet a big cushion of cash to allow them to see through difficult times, or to allow them to wait until the period where their revenue gets to a level where they can have positive cash flow or positive earnings. So, of course, the biotech. Okay, no. It's, even though it's called technology, the biotech has got its own cycle, which is different from the semicon, whether it's hardware side or the software side. So they have different cycles. So the biotech have seen their own cycles, but those two companies, Invite and PacBio, um, because of their forward-looking business strategy, they would be able to survive. I mean, look, the sectors that they are in these two companies, PacBio and Invite, they are in the DNA sequencing industry, and DNA sequencing is still it's not cyclical like, for example, sale of computers or sale of smartphones and all that. DNA sequencing, it's still a young industry, even though the technology has been there for quite some time. But in terms of its commercialization, it is still at the early stages, and the growth in front of PacBio and Invite is still extremely excellent.
Question from Yuk Long. Can we invest in health sector? Why?
Yeah, of course you can invest in health sector. There's no law to
Restriction?
there's no law to say you cannot invest in health sector. It's if you think that the health sector is attractive, by all means. It's just that in my case, my personal view is that I don't really like when you say health sector. Let's say I'm referring to, for example, the healthcare, the hospitals, pharmaceutical is also health sector, but pharmaceutical is a bit different. If you look at the hospitals and all those type of businesses, my personal belief, my personal view is that those type of activities should not be commercialized. They made profit making, because I mean many of us go to hospitals in Malaysia, whether it's Subang, Sari, Pantai, and so on and so forth. You know that the minute the hospital knows that you have an insurance, then they
Wow.
tell you, oh, can you please do blood test, urine test,
Yeah.
X-ray, MRI, ultrasound,
Mm.
even though it's unnecessary, because the motivation is to squeeze as much revenue as possible from you, because they know that insurance is going to pay, although ultimately it's you who's paying. So profit motive is so strong, and the hospitals, the healthcare sector is incentivized to exploit the patients, is incentivized to exploit their customers, and then in the end the customers become more unhealthy than before. So I'm not in favor. I would think that the health sector is something that should be provided as a public service rather than as a profit making service.
I hope your question's been answered. And also a question from
Mm.
Gyap Singh. If US corporate sales is going to be lower, would China companies be spared as a China internal consumption may not be enough to cover the
It
shortfall?
depends on the company. If the company in China only sells domestically, or uh, doesn't rely that much on the American market, then of course their revenue will increase. I mean, like Trip.com or Hai Di Lao. Hai Di Lao doesn't really depend on the US economy. Trip.com depends on Chinese travelers. So the slowdown, a recession in US will not affect them, right? But there are other companies that sell to the US market. Of course, they will be affected.
Mm.
But as a whole, the trend, because of what Trump has done and what Biden has continued, the exports from China to US has been dropping, which means that sales of Chinese consumers, sale of Chinese companies to US consumers has been dropping. And the Chinese exports to the ASEAN market has been going strongly. In fact, the ASEAN market is now China's largest export destination. So the olden days where the US sneezes and the rest of the world catches a cold, that day is gone. That day is
Long gone.
long gone. Now it is the world economy has got a lot more sources of growth and more diversified, which is healthier. So to answer the question, um, if the Chinese companies are only serving domestic market or non-American market, then unlikely they're going to be affected.
Hmm. And we have question. Mr. Tan, do you think it is a blessing that you did not manage to buy Tesla?
Well, who asked that question?
Why Chun?
No, because when I started researching on Tesla, it was
Mm.
in 2012. I started researching on Tesla 10 years
10 years
ago,
ago. Mm.
when the price of Tesla was like, maybe if you adjust it, everything is like maybe just a few US dollars. So even if Tesla were to drop 99% from $400, and if I were to buy Tesla in 2012, I would still make money. Of course, a lot less than if I sold at 400, But Tesla is a very interesting company. Elon Musk, I respect him a lot. In fact, in many ways, I respect Elon Musk more than I respect Warren Buffett, and for various reasons. So I think Tesla deserves to succeed, and I I wish I bought Tesla really. I mean, because I started researching them very early on.
Well, it's okay. Question from Leong Yok Long. Is the current market is in formal condition, like fear of missing out?
Okay, I'm not sure which market
You are referring
Mr.
to.
Leo is referring to. If you're talking about Malaysia, I don't think there's a fear of missing out, except for maybe some of the semicon stocks, right? They seem to, uh, well, the investor seems to be fearing that they'll miss out the next upturn in the semicon stocks.
Oh, okay.
In the case of US, uh, I don't. It really depends on what sector you look at. For example, Nasdaq has dropped 30, 35, 40%, and those which are linked to the boom in the pandemic, right? Like your Peloton, like your Zoom.com, right? Spotify, Netflix, they all have plunged like 80, 90%. And of course, they will rally from there because I don't think Zoom is going to disappear. I don't think Netflix is going to disappear. But anyway, Spotify has started retrenching.
Ah.
I don't think Spotify is going to disappear. So they'll come to a level where the valuation is attractive for serious investors to go back in again. So in the case of the S&P 500, in the case of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, uh, the some sectors has this fear of missing out. The consumer staples, that is an area where there's a bit of a bubble there. Then your observation of FOMO in the consumer staple could be applicable. But if you look at other sectors in the housing stocks, the US housing stocks, been they've also crashed.
Yes. Now we have question from YouTube. Tan Hein with two questions. One of the ICAP major shareholding is Chrono. How will this technology recession affect the company? And since recap takes effect, what is Mr. Tan's opinion how this will affect Malaysia in the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay, let me read the question again. Not RCEP, RCEP,
RCEP.
Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. That's the second question.
Mm.
So the investment of iCapital.biz Berhad. That's our listed closed-end fund, right? It's the only listed closed-end fund in Malaysia,
Yes.
and that is the one that I would advise you all, strongly recommend you to invest
Invest.
because it's almost zero risk but decent returns. So the question of chronology is that uh, it's in a different segment, although it's in the managing of data, whether it's structured or unstructured data. The areas that chronology is exposed to is basically ASEAN and China. And in the this 2023-2024, ASEAN is expected to be less affected by a US recession than in the previous cycles because of the opening of China. So chronology is in the correct, in terms of geography, in terms of country, is in the correct sector. In fact, the last 2 3 years, because of the lockdown, particularly in the China and ASEAN countries, it has slowed down the growth of chronology, even though they've been profitable throughout. But the opening of China, the reopening of China, is going to benefit companies like chronology. In fact, I don't know. This is a very interesting comment made by a computer science graduate who I think is only about 21, 22 years old. This computer science student commented that because she went to attend our investor day on 27 November last year, and the managing director of Chronology was one of the speakers. So this young computer science student or
Student.
graduate said that it's so interesting. Chronology sounds like it's going to be the next Amazon.com. Uh, if what this young computer science person said is true, then obviously ICAP has made the right investment, right? So RCEP is, like I said, it's regional economic partnership, and this is the largest free trade agreement in the world because it includes China, South Korea, ASEAN, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, right? And it will benefit Malaysia in a positive sense because it's not it's not as in terms of the opening, the trade opening is not as deep and as comprehensive as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, for example. But it has allowed a lot of tariffs, a lot of duties to be reduced or even abolished. So that's going to create a lot of intra-Asia trade. That means trade within Northeast Asia, which is China, Korea, and Southeast Asia and Australia, New Zealand. That will make this region a lot more resilient to downturn in Europe and US. You make this region a lot more. I don't want to use the word dependent. You make this region in a better position to benefit from the growth, the continued growth of the Chinese economy. So RCEP is a positive, is a plus plus for Malaysia and the Asia Pacific region as a whole.
Today questions were overwhelming and quite a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
we have questions also
Mm,
from Facebook
mm,
HC on
mm.
what are the indicators to watch out for to know if tech stock has reached the bottom? I
Oh,
don't know how to
Mr.
answer.
Ong or Miss Ong. Oh, I wish I know.
But yeah.
Uh, I mean, there are multiple indicators. You can look at technical indicators. You can look at the charts. You can look at fundamental things like valuation, right?
Yeah.
You can look at macro indicators like the economic indicators, inflation, interest rate. There's no one size that fits all, right? And like I mentioned about 20 minutes ago, I think the one key indicator, a lot of tech stocks have plunged. Even your Adobe, even though your even Alphabet, they've plunged a lot, right? So of course, these are profitable companies. These are not like your dot-com bubble in 2000 where a lot of companies don't even have any business at all, right? These are Adobe is solidly profitable. KLA, Tencor, Applied Materials is solidly profitable. And when the price drops to a certain level, then it becomes attractive again. So company valuation, technical indicators, macroeconomic indicators. But for this particular period of time, the one that I want to focus on is US inflation and US interest rate, because that will determine the valuation of the tech stocks, and it will also determine if US interests continue to go up to 5%, 5.5%, 6%, and stay at that level, then the economic impact on the US economy will be even more serious than originally expected.
Yes. Think we want to giving too many questions?
No, go on, go on, go on.
I can continue. Think
Because we have been not having Saturday sessions for a long time.
yeah, and today response is really good. Thank you so much for your questions. And for HK Wong, YouTube, any fair value for e-nature?
Okay, in nature is nothing to do with technology actually, so maybe we should disqualify the question.
Okay. We
But but
will.
but but just to share with the rest, in nature is the franchise holder for Body Shop. They operate the Body Shop. I mean, for those of you who are not familiar, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Body Shop, right?
Yes.
They sell skincare, whatever
Make
it
our
is,
face beautiful.
yeah, or ugly.
Uh-huh.
And they have the franchise for Malaysia and Vietnam.
Hmm.
And Vietnam is their, I mean, Malaysia is more mature, but Vietnam is growing. So, I mean, if you believe in the Vietnamese economy, if you believe in the Body Shop franchise, then in nature would be interesting. Fair value, I think a lot depends on, the last 2 years, 3 years, because of the pandemic. So the business operations of in nature or Body Shop, of course, has been affected, right? But nevertheless, the reopening of the economy is a big booster for them.
Hmm.
Uh, how would I put it? Fair value. When you give a fair value figure, it's based on a lot of assumptions. And then fair value is something that doesn't stay static. It's not just one figure, it's not like 2 ringgit.
Yeah.
Right? It can be a range of 2 ringgit to 250, for example. And it's based on certain assumptions. And those assumptions will change. So when I give a fair value like that in a talk like that, I'm very cautious because I cannot change my fair value when circumstances change. So I would want to stay away on giving a figure on the fair value of in nature. I think more important uh, to either Miss Wong or Mr. Wong is to look at the business model, whether you believe that this business model, which is a franchise from Body Shop, whether it's an attractive business model. I think that is more important. If you believe that it is a good business model to be investing in, then the fair value becomes less important. But if you think that the business model is a lot of risk, it's not sustainable, then whatever the fair value is, you want to stay away from in nature.
So we'll take last.
Go on, go on.
Okay. So a question from Lim Kwan Ling, Facebook. What is your view on the cost of shipping drop tremendously? How does it affect shipping company? Because I saw there are few companies with single digit PE and high dividend yield companies that looks attractive. We're giving too much advice.
Uh,
Thank you for a
well, this is
question.
also a non-technology question,
Yeah.
so maybe we don't want to stray away too much
Yeah.
from the technology topic.
Stay tuned
But
for the next
just,
live.
but just a quick answer.
Hmm.
Shipping industry, shipping business is even more cyclical than the technology companies, and their cycles, how would I call it? Their cycles are super long. They have a short boom and long periods of depressed activities.
Hmm.
Right? Unless you are super giants like MERS and so on, that's different. Of course, co-shipping, that's different. But generally speaking, the cycles are very long, and you got to be careful. The shipping industry is a lot more difficult it's a complex industry because it depends on global trade or regional trade, and shipping rates are very volatile, and makes what I'm saying is that it makes the transparency of the business uh, something that is difficult to be able to have transparency in a reliable manner. So be careful when it comes to these deep cyclical companies.
Okay. And
Maybe any technology questions?
yeah, from Obsta.
No, is it a technology question? So let's look at the technology question. If there are none, then we,
Okay, the last one then related to technology.
Hmm.
Would you foresee the Biden administration will continue to beat or threaten China technological advancement, which also hurt the US tech companies? Or do you think Biden would U-turn or loosen the control towards China technology sector?
The technology restrictions that the US government is placing on China is not going to, it's not just a Biden thing.
Hmm,
The next president will most likely do the same thing and even increase the restrictions. So it's not just a technology war that the Biden administration is launching against China. It is an all-out war against China. So the question cannot be just seen, or the question cannot be framed
hmm,
just in terms of technology. It is to be framed in terms of the US wanting to strangle China.
hmm. Well, we're giving
Hmm.
too much like free advice
Any
like
other
this. For now,
any
I
other
think
technology? Anyway, for those of you who are interested in non-technology, next week it's interesting. We got a feedback, we got a comment from one of our Instagram followers.
yes,
The question is,
like
what is the purpose of life? What how do I see the purpose in life?
yes.
So next week that'll be our topic. And for those of you who have any other comments, any insights,
Let us know.
please write there. Feel free to write whatever it is.
Hmm,
As long as you don't say any vulgar words and all that, we don't censor them. Whatever you write, whatever your expressions are, will be there, and we'll take it up.
yes, we'll
Right?
take it up. And that's it for
Mm-hmm.
today. Thank you so much for all of your questions and
So it looks like maybe Saturday 11 o'clock is a
small.
more popular session,
Yes,
right? We
actually,
got more
someone in
people.
fact they preferred Saturdays.
What?
Preferred
Sorry.
preferred Saturdays on Facebook comment.
Uh-huh.
So they actually
What did
say,
they say?
um, preferred Saturdays. Saturdays
Mm-hmm.
are good,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, we are delighted to know.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, and thank you so much for watching throughout the whole live session. And
yeah. And tomorrow is for those who are the Hokkien Chinese.
拜天公
Yeah, tomorrow is the day where you pray
pray
to.
up.
Yeah, it's for the Hokkiens. The ninth day is more important than Chinese New Year day itself.
And today is everyone's birthday.
Okay.
So happy birthday everyone in Chinese, like yeah.
Mm.
And once again, don't forget to click the like and share button on our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on our social medias to get the latest updates like what is the topic and then
Mm.
our time.
Mm.
We resume next week,
Mm.
Saturday 11. And thank you and hope to see you all again next Saturday.
All
And
right.
happy
Thanks.
Chinese New Year once again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone.